My name is Babette Wilson. I am 68 years old, a mother, a widow, and the woman who built a fortune brick by brick from a small town in Montana. And on the morning of my only son's wedding, I woke to find every strand of my silver hair gone. My hand touched nothing but bare skin. The mirror showed me a stranger, bald, trembling, stunned. On my nightstand lay a folded note in the handwriting I had seen on wedding invitations and thank you cards. "Now you have the look that suits you, you ridiculous old woman." The words didn't just sting, they seared. The night before, I'd tasted a strange bitterness in the wine she insisted I drink. I had pretended to swallow the pill she offered. Now I understood why. The pale blue silk gown I had laid out was shredded across the floor, slashed like a canvas in a vandal's rage. The jewelry box holding my grandmother's brooch had vanished, and in its place was a silence that pressed against my ribs, broken only by the tick of Frank's old mantel clock and the low rush of the heating vent. Most women would have hidden, most would have curled in shame, but I had survived poverty, built a real estate empire from $500, nursed my husband through cancer, and raised a son I loved more than my own breath. This act of cruelty would not erase me. I called my sister Judith. Her gasp over the phone was sharp enough to cut glass. "Babs, who did this to you?" When she arrived, she wrapped her arms around me and whispered, "This is assault." She wanted police sirens and courtrooms. I wanted something else. Dignity, truth, and above all, to protect my son from the woman who had orchestrated this nightmare. By the time Judith's stylist friend fitted me with a short silver wig and slid me into a navy dress pulled from the back of my closet, I was no longer a victim. I was a witness with evidence in my purse and a decision burning in my chest. At the Westbrook Hotel, chandeliers blazed over crystal and orchids. Guests murmured, champagne flutes chimed. My son, Jackson, stood in his tuxedo, handsome and hopeful, the image of his father on our wedding day. He turned, saw me, and faltered, and then she appeared beside him, radiant in white, her smile a blade wrapped in lace. What would you do if the woman marrying your child shaved your head in the dark and dared you to stay silent? Share where you're watching from, and stay with me on Roots and Secrets, because the toast I gave that night changed everything. I was born in a house where the walls creaked when the Montana winds pushed too hard, where dinner sometimes meant a can of beans split 3 ways. My parents taught me to work, but they could never shield me from the truth that hard work doesn't always pay the bills. At 19, with $500 saved from scrubbing motel bathrooms, I bought a rundown duplex. I patched plaster myself, painted walls, begged friends to help me replace windows. When I sold it, I tripled my money. That was the first stone in the empire I would later build. By 30, I had an office with my name on the glass, Wilson Realty. And by 40, 3 states knew who I was. That's when Frank appeared, tall and brilliant, leaning over a hotel bar at a business conference. Unlike so many men of his generation, he didn't flinch at my ambition. He toasted it. He married me not because I fit a mold, but because I broke one. We had one son, Jackson, our golden boy. Frank and I made a vow to give him what we never had: stability, choices, the chance to build without fear. But we also swore not to spoil him. Jackson grew up hauling files into the office on summer afternoons, learning that every deal was earned. He was kind, he was clever, and he carried his father's quiet dignity. Then, cancer came like a thief in the night. Frank was gone in months. At the funeral, Jackson gripped my hand so tightly my fingers went numb. "It's just us now, Mom," he whispered. That bond was iron. Frank left everything to me, over $200 million, because he trusted I would know when and how to pass it on. We had always planned. When Jackson married, we would gift him a portion so he could start his life without the chains we had worn. 120 million. A staggering sum, but one Frank and I had agreed upon. For 2 years, Jackson grieved in silence, burying himself in architectural plans, blueprints stacked like barricades. Then one night at a charity gala, he met Natalie Pearson. She moved through the room like she owned the light itself. Dark hair, blue eyes that cut sharp, laughter spilling out like champagne bubbles. Jackson fell hard and fast. 3 months later, they were engaged. At first, I was relieved. To see my son's shoulders ease, to hear him laugh again, it filled my cracked chest with warmth. When he brought her to Sunday dinner, she complimented my roast chicken, admired the photographs on the mantel, asked about family traditions. But sometimes, her smile never touched her eyes. Sometimes she made small jokes about my outdated clothes or my vintage furniture. I laughed along, not wanting to seem brittle. When I told Judith, she said maybe I was jealous of sharing Jackson's attention. I tried to believe her. As wedding plans grew, so did the cracks. Natalie and her mother commandeered everything. When I suggested Lakeside Gardens, the place where 3 generations of Wilsons had celebrated milestones, Natalie rolled her eyes. "We need something more modern. No offense, Babette, but that place is Stone Age." Her friends giggled. My son stared at his shoes. I invited her to lunch, hoping to find a bridge. She spent most of it scrolling her phone, then turned every conversation back to money. What kind of house they could buy, how much the transfer would be, what investments I favored. When I mentioned Frank's wish that some funds go to charity, she changed the subject without blinking. The necklace was the breaking point. My grandmother's pearls had been worn by every bride in our family for 4 generations. I offered them to Natalie as her something borrowed. She wrinkled her nose. "Oh, those old things? I already have jewelry picked out, something more current." Later, I found the pearls tossed on a side table like costume beads. I told myself all brides are stressed. I told myself marriage softens edges. I told myself my son's joy mattered more than my pride. But then came the restroom overhearing. At the rehearsal dinner, I stepped into a stall just as Natalie's voice carried through the echoing tiles. "The old lady just won't quit with her traditions. At least she's paying for everything." A bridesmaid chimed in. "And there's the money coming." Natalie laughed, a sound like glass breaking. 120 million reasons to put up with her. Once it's in our account, things will be different. Jackson agrees we'll move across the country, finally free from her influence. I couldn't breathe. My son, my boy, planning to leave me, convinced by a woman who reduced his inheritance to a transaction. That night, I phoned Judith in tears. "She doesn't love him, Jude. She loves what comes with him." Judith urged me to confront Jackson, but whenever I hinted, he grew defensive, protective of Natalie. His love for her was a blindfold. The next day, Maria, my housekeeper, mentioned Natalie had been asking about my medications, whether I used sleeping pills. "She said it was for a health intervention," Maria explained, uneasy. My stomach turned. Later, I overheard Natalie on the phone. "Once we have the accounts, we can sell off her sentimental properties. Jackson won't resist." She meant the first building I had ever bought, now a community center, and our lakeside summer home. Memories turned into assets in her mouth. I checked her background. No record at Parsons School of Design, as she'd claimed. Family money? Gone years ago. 2 broken engagements to wealthy men, both dissolving under strange circumstances. When I tried to ask Jackson carefully, he snapped, "Stop digging into her past, Mom. Respect her privacy." Still, I held back. It was his wedding, his day, my chance to hand him Frank's legacy and watch him start a new chapter. The night before the wedding, Natalie poured me a glass of wine that tasted bitter. She pressed a special herbal supplement into my palm, urging me to sleep well for the big day. I pretended to swallow it, then flushed it down the sink. Her eyes followed me too closely, her sister glancing at the clock as though waiting for something. And when the morning came, I woke hairless, dress destroyed, jewelry stolen, a note on my pillow dripping venom. Everything I had overlooked was suddenly undeniable. And yet, the wedding was set for 2 o'clock. Hundreds of guests were arriving. My son was waiting at that altar. I was standing on the edge of a decision: retreat into humiliation or walk into the fire with my head high. The hotel lobby smelled of lilies and polish, a mix of celebration and sterility. Judith's hand stayed pressed into the small of my back as if she feared I might collapse. Maybe I did look that way, my wig styled into a bob shorter than I ever would have chosen, the navy dress borrowed from the back of my closet, my posture held together with pins of sheer will. But inside, I was boiling. Every step toward the ballroom doors was a reminder that the woman my son was marrying had already crossed the line from cruelty to crime, and I had let it happen. Jackson stood just outside the double doors, laughing nervously with his groomsmen, straightening a cufflink, brushing invisible lint from his lapel. For a moment, my heart softened. He looked so much like Frank the day we married, hopeful, handsome, unaware that the world could be merciless. "Mom," he said when he spotted me, surprise flickering in his eyes. "What did you do to your hair?" His tone was confused, not cruel, but it landed like a blow. Before I could answer, she appeared. Natalie glided across the carpet, lace spilling behind her, veil pinned with crystals that caught every chandelier's light. "Babette," she said sweetly, though her eyes sliced me open. "What a different look for you. Trying something new for the special day?" My throat tightened. This woman had drugged me, stripped me, left me bald with a note like a knife. "You know exactly what happened to my hair, Natalie." Jackson blinked, confused. "What are you talking about, Mom?" "She drugged me last night," I said, forcing my voice to stay calm. "And she shaved my head while I slept. She destroyed my gown. My jewelry is gone." Silence fell around us. A groomsman coughed. A bridesmaid froze mid-step. And in my son's eyes, I thought for one instant I saw a flicker of doubt, a recognition. But it vanished as quickly as it came. His cheeks reddened and his voice rose. "How could you say something like that? Today, of all days?" Natalie's eyes brimmed with tears, her lips trembling in practiced pain. "I don't know why you hate me so much, Babette. I've tried so hard to be a good daughter." "I'm not lying," I whispered, reaching into my purse. "She left this note." Jackson held up his hand. "Stop. I don't want to see it. You've been finding fault with her since the beginning. You're trying to ruin this." The bridesmaids exchanged glances. One leaned to another, muttering just loud enough for me to hear. "Probably cut her own hair in the middle of the night." Senior moment. Their snickers hit me like rocks. Judith grabbed my arm. "Come on, Babs. Don't give them more to talk about." I let her steer me into the ballroom, but each step burned. I had said no. I had spoken the truth aloud, and in return, I had been branded delusional. The ceremony began. The music swelled, the guests rose. Natalie walked down the aisle like a vision carved from marble. I sat rigid, hands clasped in my lap, the wig itchy against my scalp. Every vow pierced me. For better or worse, in sickness and in health. My son spoke those words with devotion, and I wanted to scream that worse had already come, that sickness had already slithered into our lives. When the officiant asked if anyone objected, Judith's hand crushed mine. I could have stood. I could have shouted. But Jackson's eyes glowed with belief, with love so blind it would have crushed me if I tore it away. I stayed silent. Applause, the kiss, confetti. My son beamed at a woman who had stripped me in the night. During the cocktail hour, I drifted near a marble column, watching clusters of guests sip champagne. Natalie's voice carried across the room, sweet and pitying. Poor Babette. She came with that tragic haircut, then tried to say, "I did it." Jackson thinks she's struggling. We'll probably need to get her help after the honeymoon. Laughter swirled around her like perfume. My stomach twisted. My son's new bride had drugged me, humiliated me, and now painted me as unstable. And people believed her. I lifted a champagne flute, but couldn't swallow a drop. The bubbles fizzed against my lip like mockery. I slipped out to the hotel's side corridor and pulled out my phone. Thomas answered, voice crisp. "Mrs. Wilson?" "Thomas!" I said, my voice shaking with rage and something harder underneath. "The transfer scheduled for tomorrow. Stop it! Halt everything!" "All of it?" "All of it. Every cent. I'll explain later. Just stop it." There was a pause, then a firm, "Consider it done." I ended the call and leaned against the cool marble wall. For the first time that day, I felt a thread of control stitch its way back into me. My fortune, Frank's fortune, would not be poured into Natalie's hands. When I returned to the reception, I carried that decision like armor. The ballroom glittered with chandeliers, the band easing into soft jazz. Guests laughed, unaware of the storm brewing. Jackson introduced Natalie around, smiling as if his life had just begun. She caught my gaze once, her lips curling slightly. She thought she had won. She thought her cruelty would stay hidden. But I knew the truth. And the truth had a way of surfacing, no matter how deep it was buried. Dinner was served, salmon glazed, filet sliced, salads sprinkled with candied pecans. I barely tasted a bite. Across the table, I saw my son lean into Natalie, whispering, her laughter tinkling. Judith muttered under her breath, "Viper?" I pressed my napkin hard into my lap. The speeches began. The best man told stories of childhood pranks and loyalty. The maid of honor called Natalie a role model. Each word scraped against me, each toast twisting the knife. And then I realized my time was coming. Tradition demanded the mother of the groom speak after the attendants. The microphone would be mine. But fear slithered in, too. What if Jackson rejected me again? This time, in front of everyone. What if the guests saw me not as a wronged woman, but as an unstable old widow jealous of her son's young bride? I swallowed hard, bile burning my throat. Judith leaned close. "Say nothing tonight if you're not ready. Protect yourself." I shook my head. I already said no once, and they called me a liar. If I stay quiet now, the lie becomes the truth. The maid of honor finished, her words dripping honey. Applause rippled. The microphone was passed to me. My hands trembled as I stood, knees stiff. I walked toward the podium. The room quieted. Hundreds of eyes turned, some with pity, some with curiosity, some already sharpened with suspicion. "Thank you," I began, my voice soft. "For those who don't know me, I am Babette Wilson, Jackson's mother." There it was, the first true claim of the night. My identity, my role, my stake in this day. I glanced at my son. He smiled weakly, as if praying I would behave. Natalie's expression was unreadable, though her eyes glittered with warning. "I know many of you are wondering about my appearance today," I continued, "and I promise, I will explain. But first, let me say this. I love my son more than life itself. I have supported him every step of his journey, and I wanted this to be the happiest day of his life. But happiness built on deceit is fragile, and truth has a way of breaking through." I reached up. My fingers touched the wig. With one slow, deliberate motion, I lifted it off. Gasps rippled like a wave. A glass shattered somewhere in the back. I stood bald under the chandeliers, exposed, unflinching. "This," I said steadily, "is not a style choice. This morning, I woke up bald, drugged in my own bed. My dress was destroyed, my jewelry stolen, and on my nightstand was this note." I held it high. My hand didn't tremble. "Now you have the look that suits you, you ridiculous old woman. Try stealing attention at my wedding now." Written in the hand of the bride sitting before you. The room went silent. Jackson's face drained of color. Natalie leapt to her feet, voice shrill. "Lies! She's making it all up! She's jealous and bitter!" But the seed had been planted. Doubt flickered in the crowd. Heads turned. Eyes narrowed. I saw Jackson's gaze shift to the note, his jaw tightening as recognition stirred. He had seen her handwriting countless times. I wasn't done, not by half. The ballroom did not explode all at once. It was more like a ripple. Gasps, whispers, the clatter of a fork against porcelain. Faces swung from me to Natalie and back again, like guests at a tennis match. My scalp tingled under the hot lights, my shame and fury exposed for everyone to see. For a heartbeat, I felt strong. Then Jackson's voice broke me. "Mom, stop." His tone was sharper than I'd ever heard from him. "This is insane. You're humiliating yourself." Natalie collapsed into her chair, weeping into a handkerchief. Her friends fluttered around her like white doves. "She's delusional," one whispered. "Poor thing." The performance was flawless. I tried again, holding the note steady. "Jackson, you know this is her handwriting." But he shook his head, red blooming across his cheeks. "I can't believe you do this to us. On my wedding day." The microphone screeched as I set it back on the stand. The room spun. I searched for Frank in the crowd, forgetting for one foolish moment that he was 5 years in the ground. My legs wobbled. Judith appeared at my side, guiding me away as though escorting a drunk. "That's enough," she murmured in my ear, her voice low but fierce. We slipped into a side hallway lined with service carts. The music resumed faintly in the ballroom, muffled by walls, but my head was roaring. I pressed my palms against the cool plaster. "He doesn't believe me, Jude. He thinks I'm losing my mind." Judith's hands gripped my shoulders. "You told the truth. That's more than most would have done." I shook my head. What good is truth if the only person who matters refuses to hear it? My chest tightened. For a terrifying moment, I thought I might collapse. Judith guided me into a chair meant for catering staff. "Breathe, Babs. Just breathe." I did as she said, sucking in the acrid scent of bleach from a mop bucket nearby. My stomach churned. Every part of me screamed to flee, to hide, to let silence swallow me whole. But then another voice rose in memory. Frank's steady baritone the night we signed our first mortgage papers. "When you're scared, it means you're standing on the edge of something important." My phone buzzed. A message from Thomas. "I'm here. Everything is ready if you want to move forward." I typed back with trembling thumbs. "Not yet. I can't even stand." Judith read over my shoulder. "Thomas is solid. He'll hold the line. You don't have to carry this alone." I buried my face in my hands. "I wanted this to be a gift. Now it's a battlefield." Judith crouched in front of me, her eyes blazing. "Then fight. Not with screams or accusations. That just feeds her act. With evidence. With calm. With dignity. You have the note, the wine glass, the security footage. Use them. Don't give her the power to paint you as hysterical." A hotel staffer poked his head in. "Mrs. Wilson, are you okay?" He was young, no older than 20, his name tag reading Alex. "I'm fine," I lied. But he stepped closer, twisting his hands nervously. I overheard something earlier, when I was serving the bridal party. They were laughing about you, about shaving your head. Natalie said, Now the old bag knows her place. His eyes darted toward the floor. I couldn't just, keep it to myself. Judith's jaw tightened. Did you hear that, Babs? That's testimony. My chest lifted, just slightly. I thanked the boy, pressing my card into his hand. Call me tomorrow. I'll make sure you're safe if anyone pressures you. After he left, I leaned back against the chair. Maybe this isn't hopeless. It isn't, Judith said firmly. But you can't crumble now. That's what she wants. Still, when I tried to rise, my knees buckled. Judith steadied me. You don't have to walk back in alone. I do, I whispered. If I don't, they'll say I ran. So I stood, one step, then another. My body trembled, but my spine held. When we re-entered the ballroom, conversation faltered. People stared. Some with pity, some with suspicion, a few with dawning belief. Jackson avoided my gaze. Natalie sat poised, veil cascading, her expression scrubbed clean of triumph, though I caught the flicker of a smirk when our eyes met. Dinner continued, but I could barely chew. Guests leaned in close to each other, voices dropping when I passed. Judith squeezed my hand under the table. Let her have tonight, she whispered. Tomorrow, we build the case. But humiliation seeped deeper with every tick of the clock. By the time the band struck the first notes of the waltz, I felt hollow. My son whirled Natalie across the dance floor, her veil fanning like wings. He never looked at me. I excused myself early, telling Judith I needed air. Outside, the night was cold, the stars blurred. I sat on a stone bench, wrapping my arms around myself. For the first time since Frank died, I felt truly alone. Then my phone buzzed again, a message from Thomas. The transfer is halted. Funds secured. I'll bring documentation first thing tomorrow. You are protected. I stared at the screen, the words glowing. Protected. It was a lifeline. I wasn't powerless. Not yet. Inside the ballroom, applause swelled. I pictured Natalie bowing her head, receiving congratulations she hadn't earned. Rage simmered, but alongside it something else ignited. Resolve. She had humiliated me in front of my son, but the story wasn't finished. I stood, straightened the navy dress, adjusted the wig. My reflection in the glass doors showed a weary woman, yes, but not a broken one. Tomorrow, I murmured. The reckoning begins. And with that, I walked back inside, no longer hiding in shadows. The morning after the wedding, silence weighed on my house like a heavy quilt. My wig sat on the dresser, lifeless. My scalp prickled in the cool air, reminding me with every touch that I had been violated. Yet beneath the humiliation, something had shifted. I was no longer thinking of myself as a victim. I was preparing for war. Judith arrived early, her arms full of folders, her mouth tight. Babs, we need to organize everything. The note, the glass, the security log, Maria's statement, and now Alex. We spread it all across my dining table. Evidence of cruelty disguised as bridal planning. The handwritten note curled at the edges, its looped script both delicate and damning. The wine glass, sealed carefully in a plastic bag by Judith's friend at the police lab, bore the faintest trace of powder residue. The security company had already sent me a report. My alarm system disarmed at 11:30 p.m., rearmed at 1:15 a.m., Natalie's access code used. Frank would have been proud of you, Judith said softly, not for the pain you've endured, but for standing. Thomas came at 10 with contracts in hand. The $120 million transfer is officially canceled. We've placed the funds into a trust for Jackson alone, untouchable by a spouse, until he is legally free and proven stable. Relief washed over me. For the first time in days, I inhaled without my chest seizing. Thank you, Thomas. He nodded. You have more power than you think, but you'll need to use it carefully. That afternoon, Jackson arrived. His eyes were shadowed, his tuxedo still crumpled from the night before. "Mom, why did you do that? You ruined everything." I wanted to embrace him, but his body was rigid. Instead, I placed the note in his hands. "Read." He glanced down. His face drained as recognition flickered. She wrote this? You've seen her handwriting 1,000 times. He swallowed hard. She said you're confused, that you made this up. Do you really believe that? My voice cracked. That I would shave my own head and shred my own gown to hurt you? He couldn't meet my eyes. I don't know what to believe anymore. Then look at the facts. I pushed the security report toward him. She entered my home while I slept. Ask Maria. Ask Alex, the waiter. He overheard her bragging. Jackson, you've been blinded by love, but the truth is in front of you. His hands trembled. If this is real, then my wife... His voice broke. What have I done? I reached across the table. You've been deceived, but you're not beyond saving. By the end of that week, whispers from the wedding had spread. Guests had questions. Some called me directly, their voices laced with shock. Babette, was that true? Did Natalie really? Yes, I answered each time. Calm, direct, letting the evidence speak. Then came the reception follow-up dinner. A smaller gathering meant to soothe bruised feelings, to show unity after the awkward scene. Natalie insisted it go ahead. I accepted, not because I wanted to, but because I needed the stage. The Westbrooks ballroom looked different under fluorescent lights instead of chandeliers, stripped of glamour. Still, dozens of guests came, curious, uneasy. Natalie entered on Jackson's arm, her smile brittle. He avoided my gaze, still torn, still clinging to fragments of denial. When the toasts began again, I stood without waiting for the microphone. Thank you for coming. I know there are questions about what happened at the wedding. Tonight, I will answer them. Murmurs rippled. Natalie's eyes widened. Babette! I lifted a folder. This is a security report from my home. It shows my system disarmed at 11:30 p.m., rearmed at 1:15 a.m., with the access code only Natalie had. I held up the paper. This is not opinion, it is fact. A hush fell. I placed the bagged wine glass on the table. This was given to me by Natalie the night before the wedding. Laboratory testing shows traces of sedatives. Gasps. And here, I said, lifting the folded note, is what I found on my pillow after waking bald, written in her hand. Now you have the look that suits you, you ridiculous old woman. Natalie shot up, voice shrill. Forgery! Lies! But I wasn't finished. I gestured. Alex? The young waiter stepped forward nervously. His uniform pressed, his face pale. I heard her. Natalie, she was bragging about shaving Mrs. Wilson's head. She said, now the old bag knows her place. His voice shook, but his words were clear. Natalie's mask cracked. He's lying! He wants money! I offered him nothing, I said calmly. But even if you doubt him, you cannot deny your handwriting. Jackson's face had gone ashen, his hands balled into fists. Natalie, tell me this isn't true. She tried. Her voice wavered. They're all against me. Can't you see? They want to ruin us. It's always been about the money. Yes, Jackson said, his voice hollow. But not the way you think. Natalie's composure shattered. Fine! She screamed, voice echoing off the ballroom walls. Yes, I drugged her. Yes, I shaved her head. She deserved it, always meddling, always judging. And we were supposed to get that money. 120 million. Ours? That's what this marriage was for. The room erupted. Gasps, shouts, the scrape of chairs. Phones lifted, recording. Jackson stumbled back as if struck. Our marriage was about money? What did you think it was about? Her laugh was bitter. Your architect's salary? Your mother's approval? Please, this was a business arrangement. I stepped forward. The money was never guaranteed. It was always contingent on love, on integrity, on trust. And you have shown none. She lunged toward me, her veil slipping, eyes wild. "You vindictive witch! You can't take it away! I'm his wife now! Half is mine!" But Thomas, standing quietly at the back, stepped forward. "Actually, Miss Pearson, you signed a prenuptial agreement. Assault, theft, fraud, all grounds for nullification. You will leave with nothing." Her face drained. "What prenup? The one you signed 2 weeks ago? You thought it was trust paperwork. You signed without reading." Gasps rippled again. Jackson looked gutted. "You lied to me," he whispered. Natalie shrieked, mascara streaking down her face. "You set me up!" I shook my head. "No, you set yourself up. I simply protected my son." Security guards, already briefed, approached. Natalie struggled, shouting obscenities, vowing revenge. "This isn't over!" she screamed as they escorted her out. But it was. The crowd parted, whispers rising. Some touched my arm in sympathy. Others shook their heads in disbelief. Jackson stood frozen, his tux rumpled, his vows still echoing in the air like a cruel joke. Finally, he turned to me. His eyes were wet, his voice ragged. "Mom, I didn't see. I couldn't see. And you—" His chest heaved. "You were right all along." I touched his cheek, bald head bare under the ballroom lights. "Love can blind us, Jackson. What matters is that now you see." He folded into me, sobbing like the boy who once clutched my hand at Frank's funeral. Around us, guests stared, some recording, some whispering. But I no longer cared. The truth had broken through. I had said no, and this time the world had listened. The ballroom eventually drained of voices, leaving only the echoes of broken laughter and the smell of wilting roses. Tables stood half-cleared, champagne bubbling flat in abandoned glasses. Jackson remained in the center of it all, tuxedo disheveled, eyes raw with disbelief. When I reached him, his body gave way against mine. "I'm sorry, Mom," he whispered into my shoulder. "I should have believed you. I let her make me blind." I stroked his back the way I once did when storms rattled his windows. "You wanted love to be true. There's no shame in that. What matters now is how we move forward." In the days that followed, fragments of the truth spread faster than any rumor. Guests had filmed Natalie's outburst, her confession about money and cruelty, and the videos traveled like wildfire across the city. Strangers recognized me at the market, their eyes wide with pity or admiration. The humiliation that once burned me alive began to cool into something else. Testimony. Proof that survival leaves a mark, and sometimes that mark is strength. Jackson came back to live at my house for a while. His old room still carried the scent of cedar from his teenage projects. He walked the hallways like a man moving through rubble, sorting through the wreckage of his heart. One morning at breakfast, he stared at me across the table. "I don't know if I'll ever trust myself again." "You will," I said softly. "Trust is like the houses I built when I was young. It starts with cracked walls, but you repair them brick by brick, stronger than before." He nodded, his gaze low. "And you? Can you ever forgive me for not believing you?" "There's nothing to forgive," I told him. "Love blinds all of us at some point. What matters is that your eyes are open now." The annulment came swiftly. Fraud, assault, theft. No judge could overlook it. Natalie fought like a cornered animal, then fled, leaving only threats behind. Months later, she was gone from the city altogether, her name nothing more than a whisper at charity dinners. 6 months on, Jackson and I walked the grounds of an old estate, clipboards in hand. We were transforming it into housing for survivors of abuse, the first project of the Wilson Foundation for Empowerment and Recovery. Jackson sketched wide windows, light-filled kitchens. I met with counselors and advocates. We turned our pain into blueprints for hope. One quiet evening, we sat in the garden where roses bloomed against twilight. Jackson leaned back in his chair, wine glass loose in his hand. You know, Mom, if Natalie hadn't shown her true face, I might still be trapped. You might be trying to hold a family together that was built on lies. The foundation wouldn't even exist. I traced the curve of a petal. Sometimes our darkest nights open doors to mornings we never imagined. He looked at me with a faint smile. Your hair suits you short. I touched the silver stubble. I think I'll keep it this way. It reminds me that I can survive what others tried to take from me. We laughed softly together, the air heavy with roses. A year to the day after the ruined wedding, we hosted the launch of the foundation. I stood under the lights, bareheaded and unashamed, speaking to a room of allies and strangers. Jackson introduced me with a steady voice, his pride unmistakable. Applause filled the hall, but what filled me more was the knowledge that cruelty had been turned into compassion, betrayal into something lasting and useful. Later, back in the garden, Jackson lifted his glass. To new beginnings, I touched mine to his. To resilience, to truth, to family. He studied me. Do you think you'll ever love again? Maybe, I said, watching the stars. But love doesn't define me anymore. Strength does, and strength can't be shaved away. The night settled gently around us. For the first time in a long time, peace felt possible. I had learned that dignity doesn't vanish when someone tries to strip it from you. It rises when you stand in your truth. And family isn't defined by documents or ceremonies, but by the ones who remain when the storm breaks, who help you rebuild afterward, who love you as you are, scars and all. Have you faced a betrayal that forced you to find your own strength? Share your story and tell me where you are listening from. And if this journey resonates with you, stay with us here at Roots and Secrets. Like, share, and subscribe for more stories of resilience and redemption. Because sometimes what feels like the end is really the beginning of who we were meant to be.